It's time to review the grammar rules for the SAT. Instead of throwing away easy points on your SAT test, we are going to go over in this video all the things that are being tested on the SAT in regards to grammar and some easy applications so you can improve your SAT score almost immediately. Hi, I'm Rebecca Beard. I own Niceville Tutoring, which we cover subjects K through 12 with an emphasis on test prep. We have over 45 teachers on staff who support students online and in person. If you're looking for some support, we have our link in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with study tips and tricks. So before we get into the guided practice, there is 5 key rules that you need to know to pretty much increase your SAT grammar score. A lot of these were covered, especially in middle school, but sometimes a lot of students have forgotten them by the time they get to high school. So your first one is you need to understand singular versus plural verbs. A lot of times students will just spend time looking at the questions and choosing which sounds better without actually testing the rules. So the rules that you need to know with these is singular verbs tend to be is, has, was, and you always add on an S for a singular subject. And the way that you do this is if it's like the dog, then you're going to put walks with an S on purpose to go ahead and match that. And then on the other end, for plural subjects, you need a plural verb. So your plural verbs are going to be are, have, were, and then no S at the end. So just the opposite. Really basic, but a lot of people have forgotten that one. Number 2, most students do not know how to use a colon. So a colon is going to be the 2 dots. Yes, it is used for lists. Whenever I'm teaching a class in person, I always ask what's a colon used for, and they all yell list at me, but there's a little bit more. The key way to test this on the SAT is always check the left-hand side of the colon, and for it to be right, it's going to have an independent clause or a standalone sentence to the left, and then on the right, it needs to be a dependent clause or something that can't stand by itself on the right. So that's kind of how you connect them. Number 3 is a little bit cheesy, but it's the easiest way to remember it. So when you have 2 commas, what you need to remember is that the stuff in between can be removed from the sentence without changing the structure or the meaning if it's correct. I commonly call that extra fluff. So anything between 2 commas, I call extra fluff, and the same thing with 2 dashes, that's going to be extra fluff. Number 4 is going to be the different uses of a period. Most students see a semicolon and they don't know what to do about it. And I just tell them like 99.9% of the time, just treat it like a period. So kind of my hack to remember this is a period equals a semicolon. And then also there's one more thing that also is the same as a period. It is a fanboys, which stands for the for, and, nor, but, or, yet. So the only ones that are tested are really going to be and but. So whenever you see a comma and or a comma but, treat it like a period. And then number 5 is a little bit tricky. This one's going to be the introductory clause. So whenever you have a weird start to a sentence and a comma, and then you have to fill in what comes after that comma, that is going to trigger your brain to look for the subject. So an example, because this is kind of a confusing concept, is it goes running to the store, comma, Joey got milk is your example. So that's what you are focusing on for your key rules. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to practice these rules on some SAT practice problems. So our first one right here is going to be this one. It's going to be our sentence structure and agreement. And one of the key things is actually that subject-verb agreement. So this is really simple, but students mess this up quite a good bit. And all this is a reminder of is singular versus plural. I'm going to give an example. And it's really basic. So what students need to remember, if the subject is singular, then that verb is going to add an S. And I always tell students to kind of remember an easy thing that you can easily remember it. So I'm going to give you an example, like the dog walked. Very basic, but it's so much easier to remember. And this will be tested in a harder level, and we'll get to some of those questions later. But the key is you see that you've got dog right here, and that has, like, it's singular, and then you've got S. Very basic, but commonly like missed and forgotten. And then this one right here, more or less the who, whom comes up. It's not super common. It's maybe on one question on the test. And kind of one, it's normally never whom, but who, all you have to be looking for is the subject. So who represents the subject? Whom, I can't find many examples at all anytime that this is right. So I mostly just focus on who. Okay, so the verb usage, these are going to be covering some really basic ones, but it helps a lot. So what's key to remember is that is singular, are is going to be plural, which you've learned before. It's just been a minute. And then was, were is going to be singular and then plural. Has, have, same thing, singular and plural. And your example is the dog is brown. Very simple. And if you put the dogs are brown. So very simple. Okay, so this is when it actually gets into a little bit more meat that I see students missing even more. So we started kind of at a basic level just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And now we are moving towards the introductory clauses level, which is a fancy way of telling you to look for the subject. And we'll see if we can find some practice problems for that later. So what you have with these right here is what you're looking for is there's commonly like a weird description and then a comma, and then there's a blank you have to fill in. And I tell students, like, they'll spin their wheels forever on it, but the key is what you're looking for is the subject. So let me get an example. Running to the store. Then what you're putting next to it is who is running to the store. And examples on the test would be like, the box of green beets, like something silly, and then there'll be like actually a good one that is reflecting the subject. So running to the store, comma, then after your comma is you need that subject. So the subject can be something like Bob, but that's a little bit of an example. Bob needs to get milk. And obviously the sentences on the SAT aren't that simple, but if you can start with a simple example, it becomes way easier later. Okay, so the ones that I get asked about 90% of the time is going to be all of our punctuation rules. And this is the ones that we'll be spending a little bit more time on practicing. So what we see here is commas. So commas are a little bit weird. There is a lot of ways to use commas. We talked about a little bit with the introductory clause using a comma, but there is kind of a more like gut check. So I call commas like weak punctuation. It's actually something I normally check for last, and I'll model that in a little bit. But you've got to know when to use a comma, when to not use a comma, and all that stuff from there. So one of my first things to always point out is when you get to like a comma and or a comma but, that is something called a fanboys, and you need to treat it like a period. Very simple, but very, very critical to remember. Another thing you need to think of is you cannot use commas to separate two independent clauses, which is those standalone sentences, just like that. Like that would be absolutely wrong. And that's what you're going to be looking for there. Get into some more practice later. Okay, semicolons. I don't know why the SAT and the ACT love semicolons. No one writes with semicolons, but this is how you use them on the test. If you're an English teacher, then you're going to disagree with me on this, but this is the easiest way to test it. So just treat a semicolon like a period. Most of my students that I work with one-on-one in person, I literally, the first thing I have them write down whenever we do ACT or SAT punctuation is semicolon equals period equals either like the comma and or comma but or just fanboys. It becomes very, very helpful just to have that cheat sheet because a lot of them miss that all the time. And those are pretty much free points. Okay, the next one is a colon use. I don't know, it's just a gross word, but most people just see that and they're like, list. And that's all they're looking for, which is actually the wrong way to go about it on the SAT. So your colons need to be separating an independent clause and a dependent clause, which is just an incomplete sentence. So that's actually how you test it. I always say, look to the left of the colon if it's an independent clause and it's correct. And the last one is a dash, the dreaded dash. And I'm going to kind of show something similar with two commas. I know it's out of order, but I promise it goes together. So most of the time, this is what I see. Most of the time I see two dashes like this. And when you have two dashes, I always say it's like extra fluff. Now, if you're an English snob, the formal term for that is a non-essential clause, but I have a degree in science and extra fluff sticks in my brain. So anything between two dashes is going to be extra fluff. If it's used correctly, then you can remove it out of the sentence. And then that means that the two dashes are right. The reason I mentioned the two commas is that is the same exact thing. They're not going to ask you to decide between two dashes or two commas. If you see both of those on the options, it's just wrong. Sometimes you see a single dash. Sometimes it can be used for like emphasis and interruption. I like to call it, and let me make sure I scroll down, bear with me, an ADHD moment. And the reason I mean like that is you're going to have like a normal sentence. And then what will happen if the single dash is correct? There's going to be like a random add-on. Honestly, it reminds me of conversations with my 4-year-old where she'll be talking about a picture and then she'll be like, oh, and the bird was flying outside. Like it's not relative, but that's kind of how they use it. And I know it looks confusing with my same colors, so I'm going to go ahead and just highlight that. Okay, so this was like what we call our brain dump. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to open some SAT questions. I'm going to go through especially a lot of the punctuation rules so that you can better improve your score. If you're watching the recording, just bear with me. I got to upload this stuff. Okay, these questions are a wonderful compilation, not by me, but actually someone who's part of a national test prep organization who compiled all these blue book practice questions into a beautiful worksheet, and absolutely love these. This is, if you're watching this on our school account, these are in school. I have uploaded them. I absolutely love using these, and kind of a cheat code is there's like levels 1, 2, and 3. 1's the easiest, 3 is the hardest. If you're kind of like at a mid-scoring level, I always start, and in general, I always start at level 2 before I just do level 3, just because you got to make sure that you're getting things right. Okay, so let's go ahead and like apply, especially these grammar rules in like real SAT like applications. So just kind of looking at this is we're going to start at, okay, so on 2.2, Popa, well, I cannot read that. So we're going to be talking about pretty much a tribe. So a pueblo located. Okay, so let's go to the options like we were talking about before. So I see comma, I see a and I see a comma and. So right here, remember, I'm telling myself in my head that is a period. Sounds really silly, but it helps a ton. So let's go ahead and make sure we scroll down. Okay, so looking at this, I'm going to actually test my strongest punctuation first and go from there. So he was instrumental in organizing the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, and as a result of his leadership, the Spanish colonizers were expelled from the region for a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test if I can put a comma, like pretty much a period there. So he was instrumental in organizing the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. Okay, I can put a period there, but let's check the other side. As a result of his leadership, the Spanish colonizers were expelled from the region for a time. And since that is 2 independent clauses right there, that one's going to be correct. See how I'm not wasting time checking 6,000 things, trying to just sprinkle commas everywhere. You really just want to be thinking through, can I use a period? And let's test that strongest punctuation first. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to 2.3. Let me put it in focus here. See, this little bar is in the way. Okay, so we are looking at this long passage right here. Let's go ahead and just look at the options before we try to figure it out. So on 2.3, our options are, we have a comma, but it's not a comma and or a comma but. We have a colon, which we test to the left an independent clause, and the right a dependent clause. Then we have, it looks like a dash. And so whenever I see a dash, I want to go ahead and just double check for a second dash, and then just a plain California. So let's see which one is grammatically correct.
So in 2008, 2 years after the death of the science fiction writer Octavia Butler, the Huntington Library in California received a collection of more than 8,000 items, including Butler's private notes, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let's go ahead. I always say test the strongest punctuation first. So let's go ahead and test that colon. So right here in 2008, 2 years after the death of the writer Octavia Butler, the Huntington Library in California. So since that is like kind of a random pause, I cannot put a colon there because it is not an independent clause to the left of this. Other things that I'm seeing, I don't see what I joked as an ADHD moment. And then on D is going to be right because that is pretty much what you need. California. My big hint is whenever I see like the word and then a verb right there, typically you don't need a comma. Okay, on 2.4. Archaeologists have estimated that the pre-Columbian Native American city of C located across the Mississippi River, 20,000 inhabitants. Okay, so I'm skimming it. So let's look at our options. So we have a period and a semicolon, which is a super, super fun hack. So what you need to think through when it's a period and a semicolon with the same word, so that's kind of the kicker, is you need to eliminate both of those. And now you have a 50% chance of getting it right because those are pretty much in the eyes of the SAT are the same. So 20,000 inhabitants in the year 1150 is one of the largest cities in North America at the time. So now we're between that comma or no comma. So if we test the comma there is a lot of comma. How does many? So we're kind of looking if we need that comma there. Okay, so on this one, I would put the comma there because if you put a comma right here, what they are doing is they're saying that this right here is non-essential information. And since it is kind of a random interjection and it's non-essential, so on 2.4, the answer is going to be C. And then on 2.5, let's go ahead and do this one. So this one, I have a comma and, which we remember is just like a period. And then I've got a comma, a regular and just a plain word. So if we look through in 2017, the couple converted a vacant lot in the city into a. In the years that followed, they acquired 9 additional lots. So on this one here, I would test the period first. So let's see if we can put a period. And couple converted a vacant lot into a blank. Okay, on the left side, that's an independent clause. And then in the years that followed, they acquired 9 additional lots and established more than 35 hives. So since I can put a period there, that one is going to be correct.
You can improve your SAT grammar score with using these tips and just a little bit of practice. If you need another resource that's going to hyper focus on your weak spots on the SAT, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link to our SAT AI platform. But if you have any specific questions or anything about what you're looking for to improve your SAT score, we would love to meet you in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and see you next time.